Hello and welcome to the Health Source podcast, your source for all things health, wellness and lifestyle inspo. I'm your host, Beck Russell, health and life coach and the author of Life in the Soul Lane. Through conscious conversations, our aim is to inspire and empower you to live your most well, happy and vibrant life. If you're ready to elevate your well-being, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the Health Source podcast. I am excited to share today's episode with you because I am in conversation with the beautiful Sarina Coventry. And Sarina is a clinical EFT practitioner and a women's health nutritionist. Her mission is to empower women so that they can transform their relationship with their body, their hormonal health, and maintain a regulated nervous system. She supports emotional health, helping women to gently move through stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. She is passionate about teaching women to work with their body rather than against it so that they can holistically restore to a state of well-being and thrive. I absolutely loved this conversation with Sarina. We talk all things EFT, tapping, what tapping is, what it's good for, and how we can really connect to our own innate wisdom, how we can really feel our feelings. And we also talk about nutrition as well and how us as women can really nourish our bodies from the inside out. So lots of juicy goodness in this episode. I can't wait to share it with you. So let's dive in and I'll hand it over to Sarina to talk all things women's health, nutrition and EFT. Sarina, welcome to the Health Source podcast.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I feel very excited and grateful to be here.
It's my absolute pleasure, and I am super excited to talk all things women's health with you today. And we'll be focusing a lot on EFT and nutrition, and we'll get into that a little bit in more depth in a moment. But before we do, Sarina, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you, and I'd love to know what your top 3 things are that you do in your life to keep yourself really happy and healthy.
It's kind of hard to narrow it down to the top 3. And I thought I'd think outside the box of obviously, eating well and going to bed early. But one of the things that I've noticed in the last few years that keeps me really happy and I think contributes to good health is actually prioritizing relationships that make me feel really good. I'm really blessed and lucky to have some incredible friends around me and an incredible partner. And it's been hard, but over the last few years, I've started to notice the friends that leave me feeling a little bit more kind of empty. I'm prioritizing those friends that we have these really beautiful, full conversations and inspiring chats. And I always leave feeling really good and like, right, I can get through this day. Also regular nervous system work and giving myself space each day to kind of process and download the day and give myself a moment to tune into how I'm kind of feeling. And that keeps me really in tune with my body, keeps me really tuned into my intuition of what's feeling good and what's not. Ironically, I do work in the space of teaching people how to work with their nervous system, but sometimes that could be meditation or tapping or journaling or just like sitting outside. And then cooking. I love cooking. And when I find that I don't cook for a little while, I'm like, oh, something's missing and something's like off in the day. So cooking brings me so much joy, as does eating and cooking for other people. So I try and do that daily too.
All of those 3 things are close to my heart as well. And I think I love that you mentioned relationships as the first one, because I think sometimes we can kind of underestimate the importance of who we surround ourselves with. And like you said, and maybe this comes with age too, as we start to get a little bit older and we start to step more into our authenticity, we can really start to, tune into who we should be surrounding ourselves with, and like you said, who uplifts us and who perhaps isn't on the same wavelength as us anymore, and that's okay too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that like that part of being okay with it is really important, because for quite a long time I would almost judge myself and think that, oh, well, it's not okay to move away from these friends. I've had them for so long. But I think it does come with age. You start to realize the toll and the exhaustion it can take on you trying to continuously nourish these friendships and relationships that just feel hard or exhausting for you.
Absolutely. And yeah, of course, our nutrition and cooking is super important. It's such a passion of mine as well. And nervous system, we're starting to
Yeah.
all really realize these days the importance of it. So thank you for mentioning that. And I'm sure we're about to dive into that a little bit deeper now as we talk into EFT. So one of the many beautiful offerings that you have in your suite is EFT. So I'd love for you to share a little bit of an overview with us. What is EFT? And I guess also how you came to find EFT as well in your life and as a practitioner.
Yeah. Well, like maybe even starting on how I found it is I was going through a lot of emotional challenges with myself. I had a lot of kind of unresolved trauma that I didn't realize was there or impacting me. And I probably found it maybe 4 years ago. My mum actually introduced it to me because ironically, she's also a clinical EFT practitioner. And when she first showed it to me, you know, there were these people tapping on their face and their head. And I was like, this is so weird, as if this is going to be able to help anyone. But I remember I gave it a go and I tried it. And I think she did a session with me and I was like, wow, this is so powerful and so impactful. And it like opened up this whole new world that I didn't know about. And literally within that first month, I signed up to like a 4-day workshop, which was like an intro workshop to clinical EFT. And over that 4 days, I had an amazing mentor, Naomi Jansen, and just starting to connect, you know, the way that I was feeling and the things that I was suppressing and the way that I was really out of tune and disconnected with my body. When you're tapping, it just connects you to yourself and you realize like how much you might be holding or how much stress you might be holding in your body, and you don't realize until you actually feel a level of relief and you feel that stress shift. And often when we're in a state for a long period of time, we almost don't know anything different because we may have been in this chronic stress or this chronic like go or this way of holding our body in a very tight and restricted way that just becomes normal to us. So I went on to study it, and it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made. I found that my clinic has shifted a lot from nutrition and, you know, supporting women's health with nutrition to deeply supporting these women with their stress and their nervous system and their emotional health. And then I guess within that, explaining EFT is very important because, again, a lot of people will see it and they'll say, what is this? This is so weird. But EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. So there's 48 different techniques that we use. It's evidence-based. It's been around for, I think, 17 or 18 years now, and it kind of takes that amount of time for something to make its way to the public eye and start being used by psychologists, and we hope that more doctors will be prescribing it and whatnot. But essentially, it's a cognitive, so mind, and somatic, meaning body tool, so that we're working both with the mind and the body. And it's an incredibly gentle and effective tool for reducing stress and supporting the nervous system and building that emotional regulation, as I said before. And essentially what we're doing is we're tapping on certain, for those of you who can see, you'll be able to see me tapping on certain points on my face. We're tapping on these acupressure points, which are based in traditional Chinese medicine. So it's almost like instead of using needles, we're using these tapping points on our body. So what happens is when we're tapping, we're focusing on a current problem or a challenging emotion or a difficult sensation that we're feeling in our body. And as we're tapping, it sends this calming response to part of our brain called the amygdala. So this helps to reduce our physical stress response, and it supports our body in starting to gently process these associated emotions and also rewire our neural pathways that may have an association with that stress or that feeling or that emotion, so that we get these really long-lasting results. Acting on it's acting on our nervous system, it's acting on our neural pathways, it's acting on building this really beautiful body awareness. So it's really supporting the body in a very wholesome way.
And with tapping, can you use it as a, I guess, energetic and nervous system maintenance tool, or is it moving through
Yeah.
something in the moment, or is it both?
The incredible thing is that it's both. And that's what I love about it so much. It's a tool that people can use at home when they learn how to do it. So, if you have a moment, if you're a mom and you're feeling really frustrated by your kids, you can just take a moment, you can use some tapping to help calm you down in that moment. Or if, something, you've just nearly been hit by a car or something happens where you just feel a little bit rattled. Again, you can stop, you can breathe, you can do some tapping. And then we can also use it in that clinical setting to look at some of the more deep-rooted subconscious beliefs that we have about ourselves and the world around us.
I have had experience with EFT myself, and I found it to be particularly helpful moving through, anxiety and things in the moment. But a lot of it, like you just touched on, can be rooted in our beliefs about ourselves. So a lot of EFT too, in that sense, is almost like really stepping into that self-acceptance as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is with the body, it's so complex. The body loves patterns and it loves associations. And so, our body's always looking to create these associations of our current experiences with our past and to note whether it's a threat. So, for example, if when you were younger, your dad yelled at you or there was like a loud voice in the house that was constantly telling you off or telling you you're doing the wrong thing, then your body starts to interpret, okay, loud voice, that makes me feel unsafe, that makes me feel scared. So it almost tags loud voice equals not safe. So, as an adult, if that hasn't been processed and you hear a loud voice in the street or, you hear your partner using a loud voice to, yell at the dog across the road or something, your body is still going to have this internalized kind of stress response because it has been tagged as, man, loud voice equals danger. So when we're using tapping in a way such as that, we are working to really break apart this association so that your body doesn't still think that something that's happened in the past is still occurring now. And then you develop these new neural pathways as well.
So fascinating. So is this something, obviously everyone's case would be unique, but is this something that would happen, say, in a one-on-one setting with you in a session where you'd start to excavate perhaps some of the symptoms or the feelings or the experiences that the person's having in current day, present time, and then you would sort of like reverse engineer it from there?
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes if we're doing a session and someone, what's an example I can use? Just continue on with the loud voices. So, for example, if someone came in and they said, look, I get really triggered by a male's loud voice. That's a very specific example. Not everyone comes in with something so specific. Then we might ask, when was the last time that happened? What was the feeling in your body? What was your response? And then as we sort of start shifting the body into talking to the subconscious, talking to the body, we might then ask, when was the first time I felt this before? Or when's an earlier time I felt this before? And the body may bring up these memories from, 2-3 years old. I remember working with a client and she had shared how she never felt safe to cry. And as we started exploring a little bit more and more, she had all these memories come up from when she was 2, 3, 4 of every time she cried, she'd be sent off alone and she'd be put in the corner and she'd be told by her parents, basically stop. Otherwise, we're not going to give you attention. We're not going to talk to you. We're not going to love you from the perspective of a 2 or 3-year-old. And so once we can shift and break apart that association, she now as an adult feels safe and comfortable to cry because it's not this body response of, if I cry, I'm not going to be loved or I'm going to be wrong. So it's constantly just trying to explore and figure out, what our body is stored and what kind of tags it may have given these things that we experience in our current life that might sometimes be incorrect.
So amazing, and what an empowering thing that we can have access to this modality that can help us. We all have these things, don't we, from that we've picked up from our childhood or from our past or even from adulthood. Something might have happened at work or within a relationship or whatever it might be that gets buried in there in the subconscious. And what a beautiful tool that we have with EFT to be able to unravel that and come back to our true self and come back to this feeling, this sense of safety.
Yeah, of course. And even, touching on the belief side as well, all of the experiences that we have across our entire life lead us to believing the things that we believe. And if we look at, say, I work a lot in disordered eating and difficult relationships with food, where a lot of the time I had a client who, as a child, food was always used as a reward by her mum. If she did well at school, if she had a really hard day or she broke up with a partner, they'd be rewarded with junk food. So from these experiences, her belief as an adult is now, well, anytime I do something hard and I do it well, or I need to celebrate, it needs to be celebrated with junk food. And this is where I think on the nutrition side, what I was noticing with clients is that it wasn't just about me saying, okay, well, let's cut down how much junk food, maybe not junk, I hate the word junk, but like sometimes foods we eat across the week and swap it out for cooking a meal. If you're not focusing and addressing those underlying beliefs of why eating that sometimes food really impacts that person on a physiological level, where it feels like this deep reward, this deep treat, and is associated with all these positive feelings from childhood, then there's only so far you can take them with their improvements and kind of reaching those goals.
Absolutely. That makes so much sense when you break it down like that. As well as you've mentioned disordered eating and I guess stress and anxiety. Are there any other main presenting symptoms or conditions that you see a lot of in your clinic that can really be helped with EFT?
Yeah, absolutely. So stress is probably one of the biggest ones. So that's stress and anxiety. And the research at the moment is showing that an hour of clinical EFT can reduce our cortisol by 42%. And when we look at the impact of high cortisol long term, it's endless. You've got anxiety, you've got blood sugar dysregulation, you've got poor sleep, you've got pain. And being in the women's health space, I just see stress as the number one impactor on our hormones. Because if we look at cortisol and our other stress hormones and our sex hormones, they're not friends and they compete. And the body will always prioritize producing stress hormones over producing sex hormones, which is what we need to get pregnant and to have a healthy menstrual cycle. One of the things I've been talking to clients about recently is essentially EFT tapping helps the body to feel safe enough so that you can do whatever that thing is that your goal is. So tapping helps the body feel safe enough to get pregnant. It helps the body to feel safe enough to public speak. It helps the body to feel safe enough to say no if you're a people pleaser and, there's some form of danger in saying no to people that's subconsciously stored in the body. It helps the body to feel safe enough to eat the food. If you've been restricting food for a long time, it helps you to feel safe enough in being kind to yourself when, those neural pathways have been programmed for most of your life that you need to put yourself down or you need to be this perfectionist or that you're just not good enough or not worthy enough. So I find that the women that come in, what they're coming in for can be quite broad. There's obviously a lot of that kind of food and body image and, building that relationship with themselves. I do really love working with women who've gone through some form of trauma related to fertility, whether that's pregnancy loss or they're trying to get pregnant and they're having a lot of challenges. There's also a stat around women who have fertility challenges. They experience the same amount of stress as women going through cancer treatment. And if we think about someone trying to get pregnant and, cortisol always being made over these sex hormones, if a woman who's trying to get pregnant is experiencing as much stress as going through cancer treatment, then her chances of actually conceiving and, holding that baby goes down a lot, because the body is like, well, we don't feel safe enough to get pregnant. It's a big missing link I see with a lot of women who are wanting to get pregnant is, of course, the herbs and the nutrients and the lifestyle is incredible, but your underlying beliefs and your fears and your worries around getting pregnant are just as important, I believe.
Absolutely. Thank you for tying that all together. And you've mentioned in a few different examples where it's like, of course, the body is important. Of course, the food is important. But absolutely, we cannot forget about the mindset and the subconscious beliefs and the emotions, because we can't really put our different facets of our being into different compartments and pretend like they're not interwoven, because they are. And so it's really important for us to take this holistic approach when it comes to health in whatever angle we're looking at it from.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I notice so commonly with the women that I'm working with is like the thing that they come in with the issue or a challenge around is never really the thing that we end up working on. So there was a beautiful 18-year-old girl that I work with, still working with her, and she's struggling with binge eating and restricting, and her focus has been, why can't I control my eating? And like, I just feel so that I can't control my eating. And I was like, okay, well, let's explore this a little bit more, because rarely is it about the food. But as we dove a little bit deeper in, the months that we worked together, is a lot of this kind of food restriction, her underlying beliefs were, I'm not good enough, and I'm not worthy enough, and I'm not attractive enough. So food is often just the coping mechanism that we use. And a lot of the things that we do in life, coming in and saying, well, I'm addicted to my phone, or I'm addicted to TV. And it's like, okay, well, that's not the problem. That's the coping mechanism we're using to avoid whatever's actually happening in our body and whatever those underlying emotions are.
It's, like you said, it's always so fascinating to think that, we often think that this particular thing that we're struggling with is the be all and end all, but it's not always, but a lot of the time we'll have a hook into something else, or maybe into a few different things, and that's where we need to kind of excavate a little bit to find out exactly what is going on and how we can start to move through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you used to use that word hook, because I share that a lot with clients. Is often if they have this like challenge or this problem, it's the emotions around it that hook it in. And we see that a lot with chronic pain, where there may have been an accident, say someone hurt their ankle or their foot, and then we get this long-term chronic pain. And often when we work on the emotions that came up when that foot was hurt, it might have been embarrassment, that I can't believe I fell, or it might have been shame, or it might have been so much anger that I now can't do the thing that I wanted to do. If those emotions aren't processed, it almost like hooks that pain in. And we see time and time again, especially with EFT tapping, is focusing on the emotions around that pain, or what was going on when it started and how you felt when that pain began. We then see the biggest shifts in say that pain.
It sounds like there's such a broad range of things that EFT can help us with. Would you say that EFT is suitable for everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the great thing about it. You can do it at home, so it can be free if you don't have the financial means to, do the deeper work potentially with a clinical practitioner. It's self-taught, so once you learn the points and how to craft a setup statement and whatnot, I've got a free guide that I can everyone to download, so they can learn how to use EFT with themselves, and it can be done at any age. So I've tried doing it on my 4-year-old nephew when he's felt really frustrated or he's felt really upset. Teens can do it before exams around HSC. Adults can do it with themselves before job interviews, or if they're feeling frustrated with a partner, or they're just feeling stressed after a big day of work. They can just sit down for 5-10 minutes and do some EFT with themselves. In terms of the more kind of deeper work that might address these sort of deep-seated beliefs and these traumas, we only move. This is my favorite thing about EFT, is it's so gentle, and we only move as gently as the body wants to. So a lot of people that I talk to, they share how afraid they are to actually start addressing or even acknowledging the problem or the challenge or the painful things that have impacted them. And as I said before, there's 48 different techniques. So even if something really painful has happened that you don't want to verbalize, there's techniques we can use where you don't have to say it out loud. And I think that, you know, it's great that people who want to do EFT at home and try it that way, they can do that. And then when they want to do the deeper work, there's deeper levels and layers you can go to with a clinical practitioner to guide you.
It just sounds like such an amazing tool that we can all access. And I highly encourage everyone to, if you're new to EFT and you'd like to explore, maybe check out Sarina's free tapping guide and go from there. I'd love to switch gears a little bit now, because as well as being a clinical EFT practitioner, you are also a qualified nutritionist. So I'd love to ask you, we've touched on a little bit of nutrition and disordered eating so far, and I guess a lot of women at some point or another in their lives have struggled with food and nutrition. So what would be your number one, or you can do more or less, but what would be your top tips for women to cultivate a healthy relationship with food and really using food as medicine for their overall well-being?
I think, unfortunately, with women, you know, there's not one woman that I speak to that hasn't had a challenging relationship with food in some way. And so I always start to get women to think about, you know, what was modeled to you around food as a child? How did your family speak about food? What was your relationship with food? Or, you know, how did your friends talk about food at school? And as I said before, a lot of the time our experiences or the things that we've watched or that have been modeled to us growing up, it teaches us our beliefs. So was food used as a reward? Was food used as, you know, did your mum shame you for eating certain foods? Did your dad shame your mum for eating certain foods? Was your mum always talking about dieting and like diet culture and whatnot? And sometimes when we start to unpack what was modeled to us, we can be like, oh, okay, this is why I feel this way or I think this way. So if people were struggling with food, you know, look at other areas of your life that might feel challenging or don't feel good. Often it's not the food, but it's the way that that food is protecting you from feeling that thing or bringing you a different level of comfort from feeling that thing. So nourishing your body with real food. So, you know, none of this like diet, low calorie, sugar free, whatever. I used to work for, I can't believe I even did this because it's just so different to what my values are, but it taught me a lot. I worked for a company's nutrition coach where we basically, it was just macros. That's all we cared about, was what the protein, carbs, fats were and how you could fit those macros in. And I just saw all these women eating all these sauces with like, you know, ingredients list longer than, you know, words we couldn't even pronounce. And I just think if you're not feeding the body real food, then the body can't identify exactly what you're eating. So, you know, if I ever had clients coming to me for nutrition support and they had been in this low sugar, low fat diet products app, I'd say, okay, well, let's try having, you know, just a piece of toast with avocado and eggs. Your body will feel so full of nutrients that desire to eat sugar or those cravings, it's almost like you cancel those out because you're giving the body, you know, all these really beautiful nutrients that it actually really wants. I think people think that eating real food is hard or it's really hard to prepare. But once you switch your mindset, you can find, you know, and there's 1,001 cookbooks out there and like ways of eating real food. It is achievable. It is really nourishing. It is easy. And it's just about making that switch and that habit to staying into one side of the grocery store, which is all the fresh produce, and then you know, you can get your packaged rice and your coconut milks and whatnot, but yeah, eating that real food is going to be the most supportive. Noticing the way that food makes you feel. I think if you're building this healthy relationship with your food and with food and your body and learning to nourish yourself, is noticing how that food actually makes you feel. So, you know, if you were to eat this huge bowl of a combination of low-fat diet stuff, whatever, how does it actually make you feel afterwards? There might be certain foods that are fresh that don't make you feel good, but, you know, you're building this relationship with your body of these foods make me feel really good and energized and vibrant. And I believe that food has an energetic component behind it. I think the way that I feel after I eat like takeaway processed food, I feel lethargic, I feel dull, I feel heavy. Whereas if I eat, you know, a vibrant bowl of roast vegetables with chickpeas or chicken and some avocado and like a tahini dressing or something that I've made, I'm so much more motivated to make that because it makes me feel light and energized and motivated. So tuning into the way that food genuinely makes you feel.
We have a lot of similar food philosophies by the sounds of it, because it's one of my big passions
Yeah.
as well, is food and cooking and sharing this info with my community. But it's not like exactly what you said. It's prioritizing. I think a lot of times we can have these perceived barriers around why we can't do certain things. But I think it's just
Yeah.
a matter of prioritizing and I guess that's whatever you do in your day and your life is your values. And so you really need to kind of reorient yourself back to what you say your values are and live your life day in and day out in that way. And so for us, or
Yeah.
for those of us who value wholesome nutrition, then we know we have to make the time and the effort to go to the shops and get what we need and take time to prepare. And like you said, there's an energetic vibration that's imbued into the food, both from the person who's cooking and also the food holds its own energetic vibration. And so it's all of these things that we need to take into consideration if we say that we want to eat healthily and in a wholesome, nutritious way. Then we need to kind of follow it up by actually taking action and prioritizing it. So I love that you mentioned that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it takes time to find that rhythm of, you know, it does take time to shop and cook food. It's not as easy as just ordering Uber Eats and getting it delivered to your door. But I read this quote the other day and my friends and I joke about it where it's like, pick your hard. Like, you can order the Uber Eats and feel like crap. It's really hard to feel like crap and feel unmotivated. Or you can pick your hard of taking some time and going to the grocery store and spending some time over the weekend cooking, where sure, it is hard. It does take time out of your weekend, but you're going to feel so much better in your body across the week. So life for me has just come down to like picking your hard, but which hard's going to make me feel better.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned earlier, it's really starting to cultivate that body awareness, because our body's always communicating with us, isn't it? And just cultivating that awareness and
Yeah.
that wisdom, and the body's giving you feedback as to what foods it likes and what it doesn't. And we're also different. And so like you touched on a bit earlier, like there's no point in kind of following some trend or some fad diet or whatever it might be, because we're also bio individual. And so it's up to you to take that self responsibility to find out what your body needs to thrive and start to tune in to that feedback that your body's giving to you always.
Yeah, absolutely. I honestly couldn't agree more with that. And, you know, again, that takes time. It takes conscious awareness. I find that, you know, through nutrition and understanding how food made me feel, you know, that helped me develop a level of relationship and understanding with my body. And then even following on from that with EFT tapping, it's another, you know, expansion of the relationship I have with my body of when do I feel safe? When do I feel unsafe? What does feeling stressed actually feel like for me? What does feeling relaxed feel like for me? And one more point, actually, just circling back to the tuning into how food makes me feel, because I work a lot with these women who do put a lot of restrictions on their food. It's like, I cannot eat this. It's like telling someone to not think about, if I said to you, like, do not think about a purple elephant, the first thing you're going to think about is this purple elephant. So when we put these restrictions on ourselves of do not eat that, or I cannot eat that, your mind almost becomes so consumed by actually thinking about that thing that we then lead to this restriction, binge. I'm going to overeat this thing because I've told myself that I can't have it for so long. And now I have a little bit of it. I need to have all of it. So this is again where that balance picture comes in, and also, you know, noticing the way that certain foods make you feel. And even as a nutritionist, I get asked all the time, like, oh, you must have, I remember when I was dating and it was like the first topic that men would ask me, like, oh, you must have such an amazing diet. And like, yeah, my diet's pretty amazing. I do cook most of my meals, most of them from scratch. But like, you know, the day before my period's due, I might go down to the shops and buy a Magnum ice cream because I feel like it. And there's no judgment or shame of like, oh my God, I shouldn't have that. You know, 80-20 rule, eat balanced most of the time. And then there always needs to be space for not having a quote unquote perfect wholesome diet, because it's just not realistic.
Absolutely. And it's not only there to be nourish our body, but it's there to be enjoyed as well. We want to enjoy the taste and the texture of our food, and we want to be able to share it with the ones that we love. And so it's this whole encompassing experience, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And food can sometimes be one of the hardest things to actually work with EFT, because there's, you know, it's never about the food. I mean, sure, sometimes it can be about the taste, but often the taste reminds us of something. So there's emotional connections to every, like, you know, food is such a connector to ourselves, to the people around us, to the beliefs we have, to the experiences we've had. So yeah, working on the way you feel about food and where you may have learnt those things is really important.
As well as wholesome nutrition and the practice of EFT, do you have any other tips or advice for women to cultivate this deep sense of overall well-being that you'd like to share?
There's so many things. I think carving out time for you to be alone and to feel what's happening is really important. Because when you're always busy, or you're always with people, or you're always doing something, you don't actually have that space to sit and be like, hey, what does it feel like in my body today? Do I feel calm? Do I feel regulated? Do I feel a little bit anxious and overwhelmed? Do I feel hungry? Do I feel unsatisfied? You need to really give yourself time and space to sit with yourself, essentially, so you can start building that relationship with your body and what's happening within it. And the more you build that relationship, you know, the amount of time I had to take initially to start tuning into what was happening for me is now, you know, I'm way more in tune and can read and understand what's happening in my body, you know, within an instant now. So it doesn't always have to be that way. But I do think, like, you know, giving yourself some form of space just for you, whether that's something that makes you feel grounded, whether that is tea in the sun, meditating, yoga, doing a meditation. It's going to look different for everyone. Whatever you can find that just, you know, establishes a reconnection to the self is very important. I'm in nature. So one of the things that I teach women, and we may not even have time to chat about it because it's another big topic, is cycle syncing. So it's working with the different rhythms of their body and the different kind of internal seasons that we have at different times of our cycle. And we are cyclical beings, men and women. And so getting out in nature has its own cycles too. So being able to connect to nature's rhythms helps you to understand and connect to yourself, and also all the powerful, beautiful benefits of being out in nature. It calms you, it grounds you, you get vitamin D. You know, every time I go out into nature, it's just like this deep breath for my body. Wherever you can do that once a day, really, really important. Having really strong female friendships, which we touched on before, that's so, so important. I think especially being cyclical beings, having women around you that you can connect to on a really deep level, that you can share your vulnerabilities, that you can share what's happening for you. Most of the time, those women would have experienced or felt the same thing at least once, which can feel very comforting for you. And also for me personally, sleep is so important to me, and having a bedtime ritual, like every night I'll have a candlelit shower. I don't think I've turned the light on in my bathroom for like a year. So I always have a candlelit shower, which makes me feel really like grounded and beautiful and sensual, and sets the tone for starting to go to sleep. And then I might have a tea, or I might moisturize my skin or read a book. But setting yourself up for a really deep sleep, like my partner knows this. He's like, it's past 9:30 and I know not to talk to you. I know to let you get ready for bed. And yeah, sleep's a huge priority for me. So those are a couple of things.
That's so, yeah, all of those things that you mentioned is just so important, even circling back to the first one of just making sure you have alone time. And I know it can be a bit of more of a challenge for, say, mothers or people who are
Yeah.
very busy and run big companies and that kind of thing. But just any pockets of stillness that you can find is just so important. Going out in nature, we are nature, like that's just so important for us to connect back to the great mother. And even if it's just going to put your feet
Yeah.
on the earth for a few minutes and, like you said, romanticizing our life a little bit, maybe just having these little rituals that we do to
Yeah.
help us to wind down for a peaceful sleep, like these are all so important. And really they're not that hard, and they're free, and they're things that we can do. And again, I think it's just like we touched on earlier about prioritizing our nutrition. It's just something that you have to actually do and actually prioritize, and no one else can do it for you. So it's just a matter of taking that self-responsibility to do these things that you know that are going to really serve you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's one more thought that I had on something that you just said, but it's skipped my mind. It might come back, but for now it's gone.
We'll come back for round two and talk about all the
So,
other things we want to talk
circle back
about.
for round two. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
Sarina.
that's what I was gonna say. I've out like just 5 minutes, so I chat to I work with some women who do have big jobs and they are really busy and they do have children, and so the thought of taking an hour out for themselves can be really overwhelming. And what I find with a lot of the clients that I work with is if an hour feels really hard, it's finding micro moments throughout the day. Because if you can find 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes after lunch, 5 minutes in the afternoon, then that has this compound effect across the week. Instead of being super, super stressed all week, taking yourself for, a 1 hour massage on a Saturday and then going back to being super, super stressed. If we can just find these little micro moments to slow, then that compound effect is quite huge on our nervous system.
Sarina, I've absolutely loved this conversation. I feel like we could literally come back for round two and talk about a few more things,
Talk
but for now
forever. Yeah.
we'll start to wind up the conversation. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about how our listeners can connect with you and how they can work with you as well.
Yeah. So they can connect with me on social media as everyone else is on my corner of the internet. So it's Sarina Coventry, Sarina Coventry _ and I put little bits and bobs about nervous system work and how we can support ourselves throughout the day, and little tips about nutrition and menstrual cycle health on there. And then they can check out my website, which is sarinacoventry.com. And that has all my offerings. It has the free resource for that little intro into EFT tapping. They can download that guide. And, any questions anyone has, always welcome to reach out to me on Instagram or shoot me an email. Always happy to support and offer, what I can, where I can.
Beautiful. And we'll link to all of your website and your socials in the show notes. But for now, Sarina, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all of your wisdom about women's health, nutrition, and EFT.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure. Such a pleasure.
Wasn't that such a wonderful conversation? I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you would love to connect with Sarina on Instagram, you can do so by following her over at Sarina Coventry _. You can also check out Sarina's website, which is sarinacoventry.com. Come over and connect with Sarina and myself and let us know what you took out of this episode and what you loved about the episode. Follow me over on Instagram as well. My handle is at BeckRussell _ and you can follow the podcast at the Health Source _. As always, it's such a joy and a pleasure to have you here. If you loved this episode, I am so grateful if you can leave me a review or share it with a friend or a family member if you think that they could really benefit from listening in and hearing all of the benefits that EFT and nutrition can provide for us as women. That's it for another episode of the Health Source podcast. Until next time, take really good care of yourself, and I'll chat to you again next week.